Affliction Warlock has been seen a little bit awkwardly in the Dragonflight Alpha, now currently in Beta, but it has received some changes, and boy oh boy, as with all talents so far, the changes are pretty good, and I love Affliction. It's actually really fun, and it does stupid amounts of damage, and the way that it's doing damage is actually really fun in dungeons so far. So I'm not gonna get too excited because I know you guys won't take it for granted, you know, because you see me excited. I'm an excited individual. I like to enjoy the good things in life, and if you think that's overreacting, or if you think that it's an overreach, then fuck you. And then let's actually talk about Affliction. I'm joking, everybody, but listen. I'm actually very happy for Affliction right now because I didn't really know how much I liked the spec until I actually played it, and I was always a big fanboy of Demo and Affliction second, but to be honest with you, if I would decide to main Warlock right now in Dragonflight, it would be Affliction, and it is because of the changes. First of all, I'm not sure if you've watched any of our recent Warlock videos, so we'll go really quickly through the general talents because they have been changed. Not a lot, but the changes are actually really good. So first of all, the talents have been rearranged as they are currently with all specs and all classes so far. One thing that we talked about last time that was really hype was the spell lock, the kick, that you had 2 kicks, and that was not by design. That was basically a fuck up, which I mean, it was cool, man. It was cool to have 2 kicks as a Warlock, a famously spec or class rather that had the fewest kicks out of all, especially if you're playing Demonology or stuff like that. But Spell Lock is gone and is now only on your Fell Hunter if you do decide to play Fell Hunter, which you probably will if you are Affliction. There is also a new talent-ish kind of Abyss Walker in the middle, and the middle of the talent tree in the general sense is the part where most changes have occurred and things swapped around. But Abyss Walker basically makes using Demonic Circle Teleport or your Gateway reduce all damage you take by 4% for 10 seconds, which is really good because if I recall, since I don't have the old talents right now, the talent that we had to buff the teleports and so on were to give you movement speed, which was a little bit weird because you're already using both the Demonic Circle and the Gateway to reposition yourself in an ideal way, and the range of these is pretty large, so the extra movement speed would have been like diminishing returns on your mobility. You wouldn't really need it, but damage taken reduced is actually really good. You can actually play 4% is not a lot, but it does add up. It might incentivize you playing more Demonic Circle more, which I guess that's great because I mean it's a cool neat little thing, and I would like it if I would be a main Warlock. The Throughput talents are actually few now. I think there's only 4 out of all of them that were before, and they're really neatly placed where they're very accessible. You don't need to sacrifice things to get them. So first of all, we have Wrathful Minion, which makes filling a soul shard increase the damage done by your primary pet by 5% for 8 seconds. And it's a 1 point, and then Demonic Inspiration, filling a soul shard again, increases the haste of your primary pet by 5% for 8 seconds. They're minor upgrades, they're mostly related to your pet. Probably Demonology will take advantage of these more. I would have loved these buffs to kind of affect you as well. The thing is, if you use the Grimoire of Sacrifice for either of these 2 talents, the buff is actually increased to 15%, which might make you want to use the Grimoire of Sacrifice because just to avoid confusion, taking on one of these, filling a soul shard makes Grimoire Sacrifice deal 15% more damage. Obviously there's some tuning and numbering throwing around to make sure that these kind of synergize with what your pet is doing, but either all, it's just small damage increases, which is great. Then that's about it. Maybe it will incentivize you never capping on soul shards because you would lose the value of both of these talents. The other 2 Throughput talents are Grimoire of Synergy, which makes the damage done by your demon have a chance to grant the other one 5% increased damage for 15%. It's a 2-pointer, so it's 10%. And Soul Conduit, which has been a general Warlock talent tree, which is still the same, also a 2-pointer. Every soul shard you spend has a 5 and then 10% chance to be refunded, and that's particularly really good. You'll probably want these. It's 4 points, but they're decent 4 points, and that's about it with actually, outside of the Capstone, these are all the Throughputs, and the only Capstone that has kind of a Throughput is the Summon Soul Keeper versus the Inquisitor Gaze. Now, Soul Keeper didn't work last time we talked about it, and I did have a chance to test it out, and boy, this is really cool. So basically, this doesn't have a cooldown, but it accumulates souls up to 10, and then you slap it down, it does AoE damage around it. The AoE damage is nice, doesn't feel like it's overpowered, and it does add a little bit of extra flavor to the spec, where you essentially can have an extra kind of cooldown, but it's not a cooldown, it's an ability to put down, and you know, it's an extra demon. You know, what can I say? There's also Inquisitor's Gaze, which I've tested it very little in an outside world. It's kind of like the Arcane Familiar for Arcane Mage. It's a passive pet that lasts for 1 hour and just zaps everybody for a little damage at a time. I would imagine that this would stack up. We probably have to have like a big single target fight, like a raid boss or anything, to properly test Inquisitor's Gaze. And Inquisitor Gaze will probably be the raid option, since you don't really have a way to accumulate a lot of souls to use the Soul Keeper. And yeah, that's about it. The other two capstones, which weren't capstones before, is Claw of Endereth, which I guess this can be a throughput capstone as well if you do use Drain Life offensively, and that's hardly ever done unless you're playing Inevitable Demise. And if you are playing Inevitable Demise, you will probably take Claw of Endereth, because it just makes the whole playstyle better. And you'd have Soulborn, which is purely utility, and with Soulborn and everything else in the talent tree is pure utility, pure tankiness. Jesus Christ, Warlocks are so fucking tanky. And you'll have a bunch of other stuff to play with. One new talent is Gorfiend's Resolve, which is in the middle of the talent tree, 2-pointer. Targets resurrected with Soulstone, resurrect with 20, 40, and then 40% additional health, and 15 and 30% additional mana. Which, I mean, it's a nice little effect. It's a nice little, hey, you can have a battle res from other classes, but if you have the Warlock one, you get beefier, and that's pretty cool. Obviously, this could be in a sense where, you know, you will want a spot in the raid for that extra CR that makes the target, you know, resurrect with a lot more HP and mana. Maybe this could be good for healers, I don't know, because 30% additional mana, like, I'm not sure if it's 30% out of the base that Soulstone will offer, or 30% of their mana, because 30% of their mana would be a lot for healers as well. I could probably see a fight where healers run out of mana if that is a case, and they just purposely die to be resurrected and get the mana back. Although that's a very contentious thing to discuss. But that's about it with the general tree. It's really good. Things make more sense right now. On a specific row or specific level, their defensive talents, another one is mobility talents. They make a lot more sense, right? To be the way that they're arranged, and it's a lot less restrictive, even though it wasn't that restrictive before. Going into the spec tree is where we can actually take a look at what's going on. So there's fewer capstones, if you're noticing, from the previous spec tree, and there's like kind of semi-capstones, right? There's two semi-capstones where they're not really all the way down at the bottom, but they do kind of act as dead ends and close to the bottom anyway. So a lot of things have been changed and rearranged, which is good. Again, makes more sense. It's clear that the right hand side is pure AoE, pure probably dungeon setup, while the left hand side is pure single target as well. And you will notice that the left-hand side will have a Shadow Embrace repositioned, and Pandemic Invocation has been swapped with Harvester of Souls, which is a little bit better because now you can go down without being forced into Harvester of Souls, which prior you might have needed to get to stuff like the Haunt, which you can obviously get to the Haunt through the middle side as well, but I digress. I think it's fine. I don't particularly care either way. You can essentially path to the middle without having to take Harvester of Souls, whereas before you might have wanted to take a Pandemic Invocation where that was in place of Harvester of Souls, and the right hand side Agony talent, which is a Wrath and Agony. You might have wanted both, and it felt like maybe kind of a waste in your progress towards the bottom part of the talent tree, where now you can choose to spend extra points to be a little bit tankier. And all the way to the bottom, the previous capstone, Creeping Death, is now kind of like a capstone, which is the theme of the Warlock trees, where the capstones feel like they're like 2 rows higher, and then they get upgrades as you go down. Creeping Death has always been like a single target talent. Not a big fan of it because the dots just tick faster. However, the way that it unlocks the future playstyle by going further down with, for instance, Malefic Affliction is actually really cool. Malefic Affliction is a 2-pointer and it makes Malefic Rapture cause your active unstable affliction to deal 5% and then 10% if you put the second point in, additional damage up to 30%. And after you pick Malefic Affliction, you'll definitely want to go down at the Capstone, which is a choice node between Dread Touch versus Doom Blossom. And Doom Blossom is an AoE component, which is not that weird on the single target part of the talent tree, since in raids you might have some ads, and this is a good little choice if you do have raid ads. If Corruption damages a target affected by your unstable affliction, it has a 10% chance per stack of Malefic Affliction, so 30% chance to deal damage to nearby enemies, which I guess it's good, especially in fights where the boss spawns a bunch of ads. If you just want pure single target dominance, you'll take Dread Touch, which I actually love. What Dread Touch does is if Malefic Affliction exceeds 3 stacks, which I guess the wording is a little bit weird. Once it gets to 3 stacks, if you cast it again, it won't go to 4, but you will activate the buff, or the debuff rather, Dread Touch, to make the target take 20% additional damage from your damage over time effects for 6 seconds. And if you can cast Malefic Rapture every 6 seconds, you can keep this debuff up. Now, I don't know if a lot of people will like this. I personally love it. I like maintaining things as Affliction, especially in single target, because you do have stuff like Shadow Embrace that you probably have to maintain. Now you have this one that you probably have to maintain your dots as well. With Pandemic Invocation, I feel like the intricacies of a single target playstyle Affliction is really cool if you go down this path, and I am for that, although I do see how some people might be a little bit dismayed, since it does add an extra level of death, maybe like 2 extra levels of death to Affliction in raids, but I personally love it. If I play as heavy dot spec, I want to play in a way where my dots just start to really kick in. And the devs have not been shy by saying that they don't really want to give a lot of power to dots in expansions, and they have been nerfed in Shadowlands, but this actually just boosts the dot damage on one target, which I think is not that bad, since the majority of the issues with dots were in BFA, where spread dotting was just overpowered, where you multi-dot or cleave dot or whatever you want to do. This is not that. This is just pure single target, which is actually really cool, and I hope they keep this in. And as the semi-capstone is the Calamitous Crescendo that goes down from Creeping Death, which is the tier set right now. I don't know if it's the 2 set or the 4 set, but basically, while Agony, Corruption, and Unstable Affliction are active, your Shadow Bolts have a 30% chance, and your Drain Soul has a 20% chance to make your next Malefic Rapture cost no soul shards and cast instantly. Obviously, this works really well with Dread Touch, can be a better choice into maintaining your soul shard economy properly for, let's say, a damaging window if you don't want to like spend them all constantly. You can have occasional procs of Calamitous Crescendo. Maybe this will force you to stay always at a soul shard economy, so that you don't overcap, because maybe you'll get a proc and then you'll generate a soul shard as well, and you don't really want to overwrite any potential procs as well. And that's kind of how the raids playstyle might be. Obviously, you might take the Haunt on the right, and maybe with some of its capstones, although I kind of doubt it. I do see you going to Darkglare, which, alright, admittedly, not a lot of people like Darkglare. I personally love it. I love summoning demons, which is why Demo is my favorite spec. And if you don't want to take it, you don't have to. You can still go, I don't know, you can go down the Haunt path, or you can go all the way down the right-hand side. But if you do decide to take Darkglare, it does have a new capstone. So it's Darkglare the same with Entoron Plating. It's the same talent as before if you haven't watched the previous Affliction video. But the capstone is Wilfred's, which we already know, and a new talent called Grim Reach. When Darkglare deals damage, it deals 50% of that damage to all enemies affected by your damage over time effects. This is obviously meant for AoE, because in dungeons specifically, Darkglare was a little bit weird. Obviously, it's good damage, but it didn't really have any AoE implication outside of just extending dots. And this actually makes it more... It's awesome. It's more damage that's not just dot, and it does cleave, and that's really, really, really cool. And obviously this can work in raids. Let's say if you do like to play Darkglare and you want to go into raids, if it's a heavy single target patchwork style fight, you'll definitely take Wilfred's. If there's ad phases, then you'll definitely take Grim Reach, and you can actually potentially have burst AoE in raids as Affliction with Grim Reach, provided that you probably, you know, dot the ads with, I don't know, maybe a Seed of Corruption, because it doesn't feel like Grim Reach will increase the damage Darkglare based on how many dots your other targets have. Most likely, Darkglare is buffed up by the number of dots that you have on your main target. And on the right-hand side, you still have Soul Rot, which is the playstyle that we kind of have now among, you know, everything else. But Soul Rot is basically probably better positioned this way, although I kind of feel like it works really well with Inevitable Demise, and that's a correlation that I always enjoyed when playing Affliction in Shadowlands. You can probably still take Inevitable Demise and still get Soul Rot. It's not that bad, but it does make more sense to be on the right-hand side where all the AoE talents are, Soda Seeds, and then Vile Taint versus Phantom Singularity as a choice node. You'll also have Agonizing Corruption, which I don't know if I gave it enough credit last time that we talked about, but basically this can be an interesting addition to your playstyle. It's a 2-pointer and makes Seed of Corruption Explosion increase the stack count of Agony by 1 on all targets hits. Now it still says 1 when you put the 2 points in, so I'm not sure exactly what that's supposed to be. I don't know if it's a tooltip error, maybe it's supposed to add the stacks by 2. But eventually, essentially what this could mean is you can shoot out some seeds first when you go into a pack, which will not blow up because there's no other damage to proc them, and then you'll start multi-dotting with Agony, and then you'll start spamming Seed again, and this could just ramp up those Agony stacks a lot quicker, which is actually kind of cool. It's still ramp, but it's forced ramp, right? It's accelerated ramp, which I mean, Affliction obviously always had problems with. You also have Soul Flame, rather not Soul Fire. When you kill a target, its soul bursts into flames, dealing damage to all other enemies, which it doesn't seem to be capped in terms of AoE. So this could be maybe one of the reasons why Affliction could be seen in high-level keys or maybe even MDI. Who knows? But these types of mechanics are what certain specs need to kind of compete with others in like stupid 5-pack pool AoE shenanigans. Although we'll see how that plays out. And that's pretty much it. Actually, there's not big changes and a couple of talents have gone away, but it does feel like it's more streamlined now. It makes a lot more sense. It's clear paths on the left-hand side if you want to, you know, optimize single target damage. Clear path on the right-hand side, which we're probably only going to take in dungeons because there's probably way too much AoE. That'll benefit raid fights, but then again, we haven't seen any raid encounters so far. The options are amazing. The paths are really cool. Very, very unrestricted in terms of like certain talents have 3 paths going in 3 directions. Like most of them kind of have that, so that's really good. I like it that it doesn't restrict it that way because there's so many cool things that you can do as Affliction and so many cool mechanics that you can bunch up together in one build that you couldn't before because they were kind of like in opposition, with the odd exception of stuff like, I don't know, Siphon Life and Absolute Corruption and Phantom Singularity and Vile Taint. With the odd exceptions like that, you can have some synergies that you didn't really have before. So what do you guys think? I'm personally really excited about Affliction. I think this is really good. It's a solid spec. I loved playing it. Dungeons felt more engaging and more rewarding, even though if you look at the footage that we have for this video, things just die like fucking paper, man. It's so quick, and still I was able to deal decent damage to kind of compete. Obviously I'm competing with fucking Lego and his arcane bear stuff, but I'm still doing a decent amount of damage considering that I'm supposed to be a ramp spec, a spec that takes time to deal its damage. So I think Affliction is on the right track. Thank you for watching the video, guys. Thank you, patrons, for supporting the content. Dear viewer, if you like this content and want to see more of it, check the link down below to our Patreon page. Consider supporting us. It helps us make daily videos such as these. See you next time, everybody. Love y'all. Peace.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.